When human gave water to a lost alien girl, her tribe summoned him to face their ancestral judgment. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Ethan Turner stood in the heart of the desert, the blistering sun beating down on him, sweat trickling down his brow. He adjusted his gear, his heavy boot sinking slightly into the dry, cracked earth with each step. The air shimmered with heat, and the endless expanse of sand stretched out before him, a barren landscape as far as the eye could see. His mission had brought him here, but he never imagined it would lead him to a lost alien girl. His communicator crackled to life, reminding him of his task, but all Ethan could focus on was the strange, almost eerie feeling in the air. The silence was unnerving. He hadn't seen another soul in hours, not since he landed. Then, just as the sun was beginning to set, he saw her. A figure in the distance, stumbling, barely keeping her feet under her. Her skin was a pale shade of green, her features delicate yet foreign to him. Her clothing was simple, but the way she moved suggested exhaustion, desperation. She had to be lost. Ethan quickly reached into his pack, pulling out his canteen. He approached cautiously, not knowing what to expect. The alien girl looked up, her golden eyes locking onto his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She seemed to take in his presence with a mixture of wariness and disbelief. Ethan kneeled beside her, offering the water with a gentle gesture. Her eyes flickered between the canteen and him, a silent question in her gaze. "You're thirsty," Ethan said softly, unsure if she could understand. She hesitated for only a second before reaching out, grasping the bottle with trembling hands. As she drank, Ethan couldn't help but notice the exhaustion in her movements, the way her hands shook. He remained silent, waiting for her to finish. The desert was no place for anyone to be stranded, let alone someone like her. She needed help, and he was the only one here. As the last drop of water left the bottle, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and looked up at him. "Why?" she asked in a voice that was low and soft, her accent unfamiliar but understandable. Ethan blinked, taken aback by the question. "Why did I help you?" She nodded slowly. He sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply, shrugging. "I couldn't just leave you out here to die." She studied him carefully, as if weighing his words. "Human kindness," she murmured, as if the concept was both strange and intriguing to her. Ethan wasn't sure what to make of her words. He had always believed in helping others, no matter their race or origin. But something about the way she spoke made him wonder if he had just done something far more significant than he realized. "I had no idea who you were," Ethan said, still uncertain about the situation. "But I couldn't leave you here." The girl lowered the canteen and met his gaze, her eyes intense and full of something Ethan couldn't place. "You helped me because of kindness?" she asked again, her voice slightly softer now, yet still edged with confusion. Ethan nodded, unsure how to explain it in a way she would understand. "Yeah, that's right. I helped because I believe it's the right thing to do." She seemed to ponder his words for a moment, then looked away, her gaze drifting across the horizon. The desert was vast, and the distance seemed to stretch on endlessly. She shivered slightly, despite the heat, and Ethan noticed the bruises on her arms, the marks of someone who had been through more than just exhaustion. Ethan, feeling a deep sense of responsibility, offered her his jacket. "Here, you can have this. It'll help with the cold." The girl stared at the jacket in his hands, then at him. She seemed to be deciding whether to accept the offer or not, as if she wasn't sure what the gesture meant. "Why do you help?" she asked again, her voice low. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, unsure of what to say. "I don't know. It's just what people do for each other," he replied simply. "I can't just ignore someone in need." The girl's eyes softened slightly, and she nodded slowly, taking the jacket from him. She wrapped it around her shoulders, though she didn't seem fully comfortable. "I do not understand this," she admitted, her voice still quiet but less guarded. Ethan smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, maybe you will someday." There was a brief silence between them, only the sound of the wind and the distant cries of unknown creatures in the desert. Then, unexpectedly, a group of figures appeared on the horizon. At first, Ethan thought they were more survivors, but as they got closer, he realized they weren't human. Their skin was similar to hers, a pale green, but they were much taller, their eyes glowing faintly in the dimming light. They approached quickly, their movements purposeful and deliberate. The girl stood suddenly, the jacket falling from her shoulders as she stepped away from Ethan. She raised her hand, and the group stopped, their eyes trained on her. One of them, a taller male, stepped forward. He spoke in a language Ethan didn't understand, but the girl responded in kind, her voice firm but with a note of caution. "Tira," the man said, his tone stern, but there was something else beneath it, respect. The girl nodded, her gaze never leaving the group. "It's time," she said quietly, almost to herself. Ethan, confused and slightly alarmed, stepped back, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife he kept at his side. The man turned his gaze toward him, his expression unreadable. "Human," he said in a voice that was not unkind but still carried the weight of authority. "You will come with us. You have been summoned to face the judgment of our ancestors." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Judgment? What did that even mean? Before he could respond, the group began to move, surrounding him and Tira, guiding them toward what seemed like a distant temple structure. The ancient-looking building was carved from the very rock of the desert, its surface worn by time, yet still standing tall as if untouched by the centuries. Ethan glanced at Tira, whose expression had shifted from confusion to something more serious. It was clear that whatever was about to happen, she was no longer the vulnerable girl who had simply needed water. She was part of something much larger, something that held deep significance in her world. "I didn't know," Ethan said quietly, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I didn't know any of this." Tira looked at him, her golden eyes softening just slightly. "You did what was right," she said, her voice steady. "And for that, they will judge you." As they reached the entrance of the temple, the air grew cooler, the stones more solid beneath their feet. Ethan was led inside, where a group of elders waited, their eyes intense and filled with expectation. They didn't speak at first, simply watching him with quiet intensity. Ethan stood still, feeling the weight of their gaze, unsure of what was expected of him. Tira stepped forward, standing beside him, her presence a reminder that this wasn't just about him, it was about her people, her tribe, and the traditions that governed them. "Human," one of the elders finally spoke, his voice deep and resonant. "You have shown mercy to one of our own. But mercy alone does not determine your fate." The air seemed to thicken with the gravity of the moment. Ethan could feel the tension in the room, the silence stretching longer than he was comfortable with. He glanced at Tira, who seemed to be standing tall, though her eyes betrayed a hint of worry. This was no simple judgment. It was something far more profound. And Ethan had no idea what he had just walked into. "I have heard much about the kindness of humans," the elder spoke, his voice low and commanding. "But kindness alone cannot decide the fate of one who dares to aid another of our kind without permission." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling heavily over Ethan. He shifted uncomfortably, his hands clenched by his sides. The silence was suffocating, and he could feel every pair of eyes upon him. Tira stood next to him, her expression unreadable, yet there was a quiet tension in her posture, as though she, too, was waiting for the judgment to unfold. Ethan tried to steady his breath, his mind racing. "I didn't know," he said quietly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I only helped because I thought it was the right thing to do." The elder turned his gaze to Ethan, his eyes dark and thoughtful. "You humans are strange," he murmured, almost to himself. "You help without thinking, without concern for the consequences. This is not the way of our people." Ethan swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. He was caught between his desire to defend his actions and the growing sense that he was out of his depth in this foreign place. "But you will learn," the elder continued, his voice rising slightly, drawing Ethan's attention back to him. "You will learn that what you deem right does not always align with our customs. Your fate now rests in the hands of the ancestors." Ethan glanced at Tira, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. She didn't look at him, but her presence beside him seemed to offer a strange comfort, as though she, too, was awaiting the same judgment. The elder raised his hand, signaling the group to move forward. The air was thick with anticipation as the gathered tribe members stepped aside, revealing an ancient stone tablet etched with symbols Ethan couldn't read. The elder walked over to it, his fingers lightly brushing the surface, as though seeking approval from the past. "The ancestors watch," he said, his voice softer now, though still carrying an undeniable authority. "They will decide whether your kindness is worthy or whether it is a weakness that must be purged." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the elder's movements, each gesture deliberate and steeped in tradition. The elder turned back to face Ethan, his expression unreadable. "What is your name, human?" he asked, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Ethan Turner," Ethan replied, standing tall, though his voice shook slightly. The elder nodded slowly, his piercing gaze never leaving Ethan's face. "Ethan Turner," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "You will face the judgment of the tribe. The ancestors will guide us." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He was being judged, not just for his actions, but for his very existence as a human. The weight of the moment threatened to crush him, and yet, there was something in the elder's voice that suggested the judgment was not entirely without mercy. "Tira," the elder called softly, turning his attention to the girl who had stood quietly beside Ethan. "You brought him here. Do you believe he is worthy of our forgiveness?" Tira looked up at him, her golden eyes gleaming in the dim light. Her lips parted slightly, but for a moment, she said nothing. Ethan couldn't tell if she was weighing the decision or simply uncertain of how to respond. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He helped me," she said simply. He did not hesitate. The elder's eyes narrowed slightly, as though considering her words carefully. "And that is enough?" he asked, his tone skeptical. Tira nodded. "It is enough." There was a long pause, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he waited for the elder to make his decision. Finally, the elder stepped forward, his expression hardening once more. "Then you will face the judgment of the ancestors," he declared. "But know this, human, the consequences of your actions will not be taken lightly." The room grew even colder, the air thick with the weight of centuries of tradition. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, but he stood his ground, determined not to show fear. This was not his world, but he had already made his choice. He had helped Tira when no one else would, and he would face whatever came next with the same resolve. "Prepare yourself," the elder said, his voice steady. "The judgment is about to begin." Ethan stood tall, his heart racing, knowing that whatever happened next, his fate would be decided by forces far beyond his control. Tira's gaze met his for the briefest moment, her eyes filled with a quiet strength that he could only admire. Together, they would face whatever came next, knowing that their actions would shape the future. The judgment had begun, and there was no turning back. If the elder's final words, the air in the chamber seemed to grow heavier, thick with the weight of judgment. Ethan stood still, his hands clenched at his sides, trying to remain composed under the scrutinizing gaze of the tribal council. His mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening, but he felt a sense of helplessness creeping in. He had acted out of kindness, without any expectation, but now he was caught in something far greater than he understood. The elder gestured to the stone tablet in the center of the room, and the rest of the tribe members stepped back, giving way for the next stage of the ritual. Ethan glanced at Tira, standing by his side, her eyes fixed on the elder. She didn't seem afraid, but her posture was tense, as if she, too, was waiting for something. "This judgment is not just for you, human," the elder said, his voice unwavering, as he turned to Ethan. "It is for all of us. For the future of our people." Ethan's heart skipped a beat at the words. For all of you, he asked, his voice quiet, yet filled with a sense of uncertainty. The elder's gaze hardened as he nodded. Your actions have triggered something greater. The ancestors will decide not just your fate, but whether our people will continue to open themselves to outsiders. Ethan could feel the gravity of his words. He hadn't anticipated that his simple act of kindness could ripple out and affect an entire tribe. The elder turned to one of the other tribe members, a woman with dark, almost black skin, who stood with her arms crossed. She nodded to the elder, who in turn raised his hand. The judgment will begin, he declared. The room seemed to close in on Ethan as the other tribe members began chanting softly, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the stone beneath his feet. The sounds echoed in the chamber, mixing with the cool air that began to shift and move around them. Ethan's thoughts scattered, his mind scrambling for any kind of reasoning or understanding. He had never imagined that this would be the result of his simple act of kindness. As the chanting grew louder, the stone tablet at the center of the room began to glow faintly, its ancient symbols pulsating with an energy Ethan could not comprehend. The ground beneath his feet seemed to vibrate, and he could feel his heart racing. This was no ordinary judgment. This was something far older, something tied to the very essence of this people's culture. The light from the tablet intensified, casting long shadows against the walls of the chamber. Ethan squinted, trying to make out the strange markings, but they were shifting, changing in ways that made his head spin. The elder raised his hands, and the chanting came to a sudden stop, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The ancestors have spoken, the elder said, his voice reverberating through the stillness. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, unsure of what was to come next. You have shown mercy, human. You have helped one of our own without hesitation, without thought for your own safety. This is a rare thing, and it has not gone unnoticed. Ethan felt a mix of relief and confusion wash over him. But, the elder continued, his voice growing sharper, it is not enough to simply show mercy. We must see the heart behind it. We must see the truth of your character. The elder turned to the rest of the tribe. The judgment will not be made solely by our words. It will be made by what you do next. Ethan looked around, his heart racing again. What do you mean? He asked, his voice tight. The elder nodded toward the back of the room, where another door had opened. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, imposing woman, her skin a dark shade of green. She carried herself with a regal air, her eyes glowing with an intensity that made Ethan's breath catch in his chest. She was unlike anyone he had seen before. This is the test, the elder said. You will face her in a trial of character. Show us who you truly are, and the ancestors will decide your fate. Ethan swallowed hard. This was not what he had expected. He had simply given water to a lost girl. He had not known that his actions would lead him here, to this moment. The woman stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. I am Lyra, she said, her voice like velvet, smooth and commanding. And you are the one who would change our future. Ethan could feel the weight of her gaze, the intensity of her words. He had no idea what was to come, but he knew one thing for certain, he would face it with the same determination that had guided his every step in this alien world. The judgment had begun, and there was no turning back. With the heavy silence hanging between them, Ethan stood facing Lyra, the imposing figure who had just emerged from the shadows. Her presence seemed to fill the room, the air thick with tension as the elder and the rest of the tribe watched closely. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to show any sign of fear. He had already come too far to turn back now. Lyra's eyes gleamed with an intensity that made him feel small, yet he couldn't look away. Her gaze was piercing, as if she was searching for something deeper within him. You have come to us with no expectation of reward, she said, her voice low but carrying a weight of authority. But your mercy has caused ripples within our tribe. We will see if your actions match the heart you claim to possess. Ethan swallowed, unsure of what was expected of him. What do I have to do? He asked, his voice steady despite the rising uncertainty within him. Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying him with a look that made him feel as though she could see right through him. You will face a trial, she said. Not one of strength, but of character. You will face me, and we will see if your mercy is truly genuine. Ethan didn't know what to expect, but he nodded. He had no choice but to trust that he could prove his worth. He had acted out of kindness, and now, it seemed, he was being asked to show that kindness had substance, that it was not just a fleeting impulse. Lyra stepped forward, her movements graceful and deliberate. In our tribe, we do not give forgiveness easily, she continued. But those who show true heart are rare, even among our own people. If you are worthy, you will pass this test. If not, you will be sent away, never to return. Ethan's stomach tightened, but he kept his composure. He had come this far for a reason. He had to prove to them, and to himself, that his actions were not just a random act of kindness, but a reflection of who he was. Lyra extended her hand, not as a gesture of challenge, but of invitation. Come, she said, her voice softer now. Let us begin. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, meeting her hand with his own. Her touch was firm, yet there was something in it that told him this was not just about testing him. It was something deeper, something more profound. The two of them moved to the center of the chamber, the eyes of the tribe upon them. This trial, Lyra said, her voice echoing in the silence, is not about physical strength. It is about understanding. About seeing beyond what is visible and knowing the truth of the heart. Ethan nodded, trying to focus, to make sense of what was happening. He had no idea what kind of test awaited him, but he knew it would not be something he could simply fight his way through. Tell me, Lyra continued, her voice barely above a whisper, why did you help Tira? Why did you risk your life for someone you did not know? Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment. This was the question that would define everything. He took a deep breath, his mind clearing as he focused on the truth. I helped her, he said, his voice steady, because it was the right thing to do. She was lost, and I couldn't leave her to die. It doesn't matter where she's from or who she is. She needed help, and I had to give it. Lyra's gaze softened slightly, but her expression remained serious. And what about the consequences? Did you consider them? Ethan thought for a moment before answering. I knew helping her might bring trouble. But I still did it because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes, doing what's right isn't easy, but it's always worth it. The chamber was silent for a long time. Ethan could feel the weight of the tribe's judgment, their eyes upon him, waiting for his words to have meaning. Finally, Lyra spoke again, her voice low but filled with something resembling approval. You speak with truth, she said. And that is a rare thing. But words alone are not enough. We will see if your heart matches your words. She stepped back, signaling for the trial to begin. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. What was about to happen? He had no idea, but he had no choice but to face it head on. This trial was not just a test of his actions, it was a test of everything he stood for. Show us your heart, Lyra said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. And let the ancestors decide. Ethan stood still, waiting, knowing that whatever came next would shape the rest of his journey. His actions had led him here, and now it was time to prove that his heart was just as strong as his will to do what was right. If the elder's words lingering in the air, Ethan stood in the center of the room, his heart racing with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. The trial had begun. But he still didn't fully understand what it would entail. Lyra, the royal proxy, had stepped back, her intense gaze never leaving him. The space around them seemed to hum with energy, as though the ancestors themselves were watching. The room was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint rustling of the stone beneath their feet. Lyra's voice broke the silence again, sharp and clear. We will test not just your words, human, but your spirit. This trial is a measure of your character, of your strength in doing what is right despite all odds. Ethan nodded, trying to steady his breathing. This was it. He had already made his choice, but now it was time to see if he truly had the heart to back it up. The elder, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. We do not ask for your strength of body, he said, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. but your strength of conviction. If your actions are true, then you will be found worthy. If not, you will face the consequences. Ethan swallowed hard. He had already helped Tira, but what did that truly mean to them? What would this test reveal? He didn't have the answers, but he had to trust in himself. Lyra gave a small nod, signaling the start of the trial. At her command, a series of stones in the chamber began to glow, each one lighting up in succession. Ethan felt a warmth spread through the room as if the very walls were alive, watching him. "We will present you with a choice," Lyra continued. "A choice that will define the path you take. You must choose wisely, for the outcome will shape your future." Ethan's mind raced as the stones continued to glow. A choice? What kind of choice? Was it a test of loyalty? Or morality? The tension in the air was palpable as the last stone lit up, casting an eerie glow over the chamber. Lyra stepped forward again, her eyes piercing as she locked her gaze onto Ethan. "The choice is simple," she said, her voice steady but filled with a hidden intensity. "You can choose to leave, to walk away from this trial, and we will forget that you ever crossed our path. No harm will come to you, and you will be free to go." Ethan felt a small flicker of relief. It sounded too easy, too simple. But then she continued, her voice taking on a darker edge. "Or you can choose to stay, to face the consequences of your actions and prove that your mercy is genuine. This trial will test your will to face what you have set in motion, and only by enduring the test can you prove your worth." Ethan's heart pounded. The decision was not as simple as it seemed. He could leave, escape the judgment, but that would mean abandoning everything he had fought for. The very idea of walking away from Tira, from what he believed was the right thing to do, felt wrong. He had already chosen a path, and now he had to see it through. He looked at Tira, who was watching him with a quiet, almost unreadable expression. Her eyes held a glimmer of hope, but also a hint of fear. This wasn't just about him anymore, this was about them both. Without thinking, Ethan made his choice. "I will stay," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. Lyra gave a small, approving nod, and the elder stepped back, his expression unreadable. "Then the trial begins," Lyra said, her voice filled with finality. The chamber seemed to close in around him as a sudden wave of energy surged through the room. Ethan braced himself, ready for whatever came next. He had made his choice, and now there was no turning back. The judgment of the ancestors would be harsh, but he had already chosen the path of mercy, and he would face whatever came with courage. This was the test of his character, and he would prove, once and for all, that kindness and mercy were worth more than any fear or doubt. If the elder's words still hanging in the air, Ethan felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The energy in the room had shifted, thickening with anticipation, but he stood his ground. His choice had been made. The trial had begun, and he would face it with everything he had. Lyra's eyes flickered with approval, but there was no warmth in them, only the cold weight of the decision he had just made. Ethan felt the pressure of the tribe's gaze on him, as if they were all waiting for him to falter, to back out. But he couldn't. Not now. The stone tablet in the center of the room began to glow brighter, the symbols on its surface shifting and rearranging. Ethan's eyes followed the movement, but he couldn't make sense of it. It was as if the very essence of the trial was bound to that stone, its secrets ancient and beyond his understanding. Then, without warning, the room seemed to expand, the walls fading away into a vast, endless space. Ethan blinked, and in that moment, everything shifted. He was no longer standing in the chamber. Instead, he found himself in a vast, open field. The sky above was a dull, colorless gray, and the ground beneath his feet felt cold and hard. There was no wind, no sound, only the oppressive silence that seemed to press in on him from all sides. It was as if the world itself had become a void. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He was alone. No tribe, no elders, no Tira, only the empty expanse of this strange, otherworldly landscape. He turned in a circle, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is this place?" he muttered to himself. But there was no answer, just the endless stretch of barren land in every direction. Then, in the distance, he saw a figure. It was hard to make out at first, but as it drew closer, Ethan could see that it was a woman. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. She moved with a graceful, fluid motion, her presence both calming and unsettling. As she approached, Ethan's mind raced. Was she part of the trial? Was she an illusion? She stopped just a few feet in front of him, her gaze unwavering. "You have chosen," she said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. Ethan's throat tightened, and he struggled to find his voice. "Chosen what? What is this place?" The woman smiled, a faint, knowing smile that sent a shiver down his spine. "This is the realm of your judgment," she replied. "Here, you will face the truth of your choices. Here, you will see what lies within you." Ethan felt a sudden pang of doubt. What did she mean by the truth of his choices? He had helped Tira, yes. He had shown kindness when no one else would, but was that enough? Could kindness alone prove his worth? The woman stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "The trial is not just about what you did, Ethan Turner," she said, her voice low and almost hypnotic. "It is about who you are, deep down. It is about the strength of your heart and the truth of your soul." Ethan took a step back, his mind reeling. "But I don't understand. I helped her because it was the right thing to do. I didn't think about anything else. His words faltered as the woman raised a hand to silence him. "And that, Ethan, is why you are here," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You acted without thought, without hesitation, but now you must face what that truly means." Ethan felt a weight settle over him, as if the very ground beneath his feet was pulling him down. His mind was spinning, and he could feel the walls closing in around him. "But what is it that I'm supposed to learn?" he asked, his voice shaking. The woman's smile widened, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of something warm in her eyes. "You must learn that kindness alone is not enough. It is a beginning, yes, but it is not the whole story. There is more to you, Ethan Turner, than even you realize." Ethan's head swam as the woman's words echoed in his mind. Was she saying that his actions weren't enough? That he needed more? The space around him seemed to pulse with an energy that made him feel both small and insignificant. He wanted to run, to escape this strange trial, but he knew that was not an option. Not anymore. He had chosen to stay, and now he had to face whatever came next. The woman stepped closer still, her presence overwhelming. "This trial," she said softly, "will show you who you truly are. And only then will you know if you are worthy of the judgment of the ancestors." Ethan's heart thundered in his chest. Was he ready for that? Was he ready to face the truth of himself? He didn't know. But he knew one thing, there was no turning back now. If the woman's words still echoing in his mind, Ethan felt his world shift once more. The grey, desolate landscape around him seemed to fade as the atmosphere thickened, a low hum filling the air. His breath quickened, his heart racing in anticipation of what would come next. The figure in front of him, the mysterious woman who had brought him here, had said that kindness alone was not enough. Ethan could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, and for a moment, doubt crept into his mind. What if she was right? What if his actions, despite being selfless, weren't enough to prove his worth? What more did he have to show? The air grew colder, the ground beneath his feet vibrating with a strange energy. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the trial was more than just about him. It was a test of everything he had ever believed in. His mind raced through the moments leading up to this point, helping Tira without thinking of the consequences, choosing to stay when he could have walked away. But now, in this strange, infinite space, it felt as if none of that mattered. He wasn't sure what to do or where to go. The woman, who had been silent, finally moved again, stepping forward with the same fluid grace. Her eyes locked onto his, filled with an intensity that made him feel as if she was peering straight into his soul. "You must understand, Ethan," she said, her voice calm yet filled with authority. "Kindness is the seed, but it must be nurtured to grow. It is not enough to act out of impulse or duty. It must come from the core of who you are. Only then will you truly understand what it means to be worthy. Ethan's stomach tightened as her words settled in his chest. Was he truly worthy? He had acted out of kindness, without expecting anything in return, but was that enough to prove the sincerity of his actions? The woman continued to watch him, her expression unreadable. Your heart is not the question, Ethan, she said softly. The question is whether your actions can match the strength of your heart. Whether your mercy is true, or if it is simply a means to an end. Ethan's mind raced, the uncertainty gnawing at him. He had never expected any of this. Helping Tira had been an instinct, something that felt right in the moment. But now, standing here in this strange place, he was being asked to prove something far deeper. The woman stepped aside, and in her place, another figure appeared. This one was taller, more imposing, with a presence that commanded respect. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, and her eyes glowed with an ethereal light. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. You will face me now, the new figure said, her voice resonating with a power that sent a chill down his spine. I am the one who will test the strength of your heart. You must show me that your mercy is not a weakness, but a strength. That your kindness is not a tool, but a choice. Ethan's throat tightened. What was this new challenge? How could he prove the sincerity of his actions when he was already questioning everything? The woman stepped forward, her eyes intense as she locked onto him. I do not seek your fear, human. I seek your truth, she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding as he gathered his thoughts. He knew what he had to do. He had to trust in himself, in the actions that had brought him here. He couldn't let doubt consume him now. I helped her because I believed it was right, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I didn't think about the consequences, but I would do it again. It was the only thing I could do. The figure before him studied him for a long moment, her glowing eyes never wavering. Then you are ready, she said, her voice softening just slightly. Show us, Ethan Turner. Show us the strength of your heart, and we will know if you are worthy. The ground beneath his feet began to pulse again, the energy surrounding him intensifying. Ethan stood tall, feeling the weight of the trial pressing down on him. He had chosen this path, and now he had to prove that his actions came from a place of true strength, not weakness. The judgment was still in the air, and Ethan knew that the next moments would define everything. He wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but he was ready to face it. This was his trial, and he would prove that kindness, true kindness, was not a weakness, it was his strength. If the pulse of the ground beneath his feet and the weight of the trial hanging in the air, Ethan steadied his breath. He had spoken his truth, now it was time to face the consequences. The towering figure of the blue-skinned woman before him held his gaze, her eyes glowing with an almost otherworldly light. Her words lingered in his mind, as sharp as the air in this strange, silent space. Show us the strength of your heart. The energy around them seemed to build, rising in intensity, and for a moment, Ethan felt as if the very world was holding its breath. He could feel the weight of judgment pressing on him, and yet, he remained steady. He had already made his choice. His actions had come from a place of sincerity, a deep belief that helping others was what made life worth living. He had shown mercy without hesitation, and now he would stand by it. The woman nodded slowly, as if reading his thoughts. You have spoken with conviction, she said, her voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the space. But words alone do not define a man. It is the actions that follow that reveal the truth. The words felt like a challenge, but they also brought a strange sense of clarity. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but the fear that had once gripped him seemed to melt away. He had acted without thinking, without expectation, but now he understood that his actions were not just a reflection of kindness, they were a testament to his character. The woman stepped aside, revealing a new path that stretched out before him. It was a narrow, winding trail, surrounded by dense fog that seemed to obscure what lay ahead. The path you choose now, she said softly, is the path of truth. It is not an easy road, but it will lead you to the heart of who you are. Follow it, and you will discover whether you are worthy of the judgment of the ancestors. Ethan felt the weight of her words, but there was no turning back now. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, his feet finding their place on the path that had appeared before him. With each step, the fog seemed to part, revealing glimpses of his past, his choices, his actions, the moments that had defined him. He saw flashes of the times he had helped others, the kindness he had shown without expecting anything in return. But with each step, he also saw his doubts, his moments of uncertainty. The path twisted and turned, leading him through memories both painful and empowering. He had always believed that doing the right thing was enough, but now he was beginning to understand that true strength came not from the actions themselves, but from the willingness to stand by them, no matter the cost. As he continued forward, the fog began to clear, and he found himself standing at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a vast expanse of sky. The wind whipped around him, carrying with it the scent of distant lands and forgotten memories. There was no turning back now. Ethan could feel the presence of the ancestors, watching him from the shadows, judging him not for what he had done, but for who he had become. The woman's voice echoed in his mind once more. "You have chosen this path, Ethan Turner. Now, let the judgment of your heart guide you." Ethan stood at the edge of the cliff, staring out into the horizon, knowing that whatever came next would define the rest of his journey. He had chosen kindness, chosen to act out of compassion, and now he would face the consequences of that choice. The path was still unclear, but one thing was certain, he would walk it with the strength of his heart, no matter where it led.